Growing up, I always believed that family was supposed to be your safe place, a place where you were valued, understood, and supported no matter what. For most children, parents are their biggest cheerleaders. But in my family, that role was reserved for only one person, my older brother, Daniel. Daniel had always been the favorite. He was loud, confident, and charming. Everywhere he went, people seemed drawn to him. My parents adored that about him. They praised his ambition and constantly talked about how he was destined for great things. I, on the other hand, was different. I was the quiet one, the responsible one. While Daniel chased big dreams and talked about becoming a millionaire before 30, I preferred stability. I studied hard, kept my head down, and worked toward realistic goals. But in my parents' eyes, that made me invisible. When I was 18, I earned a scholarship to attend a university in another state. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. I remember calling my parents, excited to share the news. My mother's response was simple. "That's nice," she said, "but who's going to help your brother with his business ideas while you're gone?" I laughed it off back then, convincing myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. College changed my life. Away from home, I finally discovered who I was. I majored in finance, spending long nights studying investment strategies and market patterns. While other students partied, I interned at small financial firms, trying to learn as much as I could. It wasn't glamorous work. I made coffee, organized reports, and sat quietly in meetings while experienced analysts discussed million-dollar deals, but I listened carefully. I absorbed everything. After graduating, I landed a job at a modest investment firm. The pay wasn't impressive, and the office itself was small and outdated, but I was determined to prove myself. Years passed. Slowly, my efforts began paying off. I developed a reputation for spotting opportunities others overlooked. My colleagues started trusting my instincts, and clients began requesting to work directly with me. Eventually, after nearly 8 years of experience, I made a bold decision. I started my own consulting firm. At first, it was just me working out of a tiny apartment office. My desk was a second-hand table, and my conference room was a corner of my living room, but I didn't mind. I believed in what I was building. Over time, my client list grew. I helped small investors grow their savings and guided business owners towards smarter financial decisions. Each successful project strengthened my confidence. But despite everything I was achieving, my parents never really seemed interested. Whenever I visited home, the conversations always revolved around Daniel, his new ideas, his latest ventures, his future empire. Most of those ventures failed within months, but that didn't seem to matter to them. To my parents, Daniel was ambitious. To them, I was just quiet, still doing that little finance job. My mother would ask whenever I visited. I stopped trying to explain that it wasn't little anymore. Instead, I focused on my work and kept moving forward. After nearly 10 years of relentless effort, something incredible finally happened. One of my investments, a property redevelopment project I had believed in from the beginning, closed successfully. The profits were life-changing. My personal share alone came to $580,000. For the first time in my life, I felt truly secure. And when I heard my parents were planning a huge party for their 40th wedding anniversary, I decided to attend. Maybe, I thought, this would finally be the moment they saw me for who I had become. I had no idea that night would prove just how wrong I was. The anniversary party was far bigger than I expected. My parents had rented a large banquet hall in town and decorated it with golden ribbons, white flowers, and framed photographs from their 40 years together. Guests filled nearly every table. Neighbors, co-workers, distant relatives, and old family friends I hadn't seen in years. Laughter and music echoed across the room as waiters carried trays of drinks and appetizers through the crowd. When I stepped inside, no one really noticed. For a moment I stood near the entrance, scanning the room. At the center of it all was my brother Daniel, surrounded by people as usual. He was telling one of his dramatic stories, waving his hands while everyone listened. My parents stood proudly beside him, smiling as if he were already a celebrity. It felt strangely familiar. I walked over to greet them. My mother glanced at me briefly before giving me a quick hug. "Oh good, you made it," she said casually. "You're a little late." "I drove 3 hours to get here." I replied gently. "Yes, yes." She said distractedly, "Listen, could you help the caterers bring out the trays? They're short-handed tonight." I blinked in surprise. I hadn't even taken off my coat yet, but instead of arguing, I nodded. "Sure." For the next hour, I moved quietly around the room helping the staff. I carried plates to tables, refilled empty pitchers of lemonade, and collected glasses people left behind. Some guests assumed I worked there. One woman even handed me her empty plate without looking up. Meanwhile, Daniel continued entertaining everyone with loud stories about his next big business idea. I overheard him explaining how his upcoming startup would change the tech industry forever. My father laughed proudly beside him. "That's my boy," he kept saying. No one asked what I had been doing with my life. Eventually, the music softened and my father stood from his chair. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room slowly fell silent. "Before we bring out dessert," he announced, smiling broadly, "I want to say something about my family." Guests turned their attention toward him. I stopped near the back of the room, still holding an empty tray. A small spark of hope appeared in my chest. Maybe this was the moment he would acknowledge me. My father raised his glass toward Daniel. "My son Daniel," he said proudly, "is the dreamer in this family. He thinks big, takes risks, and one day he's going to make us all rich." The room erupted with applause. Daniel grinned confidently and raised his drink. Then my father's eyes shifted toward me. "And then we have my daughter," he said with a small chuckle. A few people turned to look at me. "She's, well, the quiet one," he continued. "Lives on her own, always doing those little side jobs. Honestly, we're not even sure how she supports herself." Several people laughed politely. My stomach tightened. Then my mother leaned forward in her chair and spoke loudly enough for half the room to hear. "She's basically a freeloader who refuses to grow up." The laughter grew louder. Someone even clapped jokingly. The word freeloader echoed painfully in my ears. For 10 years I had worked non-stop. 10 years building my life from nothing. And this was how they saw me. I looked around the room. No one defended me. Daniel simply smirked and sipped his drink. In that moment, something inside me changed. I quietly placed the tray on a nearby table, picked up my purse, and began walking toward the exit. As I reached the door, my father called out jokingly from across the room, "Don't forget to take some leftovers on your way out. Freeloaders love free food." The room burst into laughter again. I didn't turn around. But as I stepped outside into the cool night air, one thought crossed my mind. They had no idea what they had just lost. 2 days after the anniversary party, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. The city outside my window was quiet, but my mind wasn't. The laughter from that night still echoed in my head, along with that single word my mother had thrown at me so easily, freeloader. For years I had ignored the way my parents treated me. I told myself they didn't understand my work, that they simply related more to Daniel's loud confidence than my quiet determination. But that night had stripped away every illusion I had tried to maintain. The truth was simple. They had never really seen me. My phone buzzed on the desk, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a call from Michael Grant, one of the senior partners from the investment group I had been working with for months. "Good morning," he said when I answered. "We're finalizing the investor list for the redevelopment project. I just wanted to confirm if your additional partners are still joining." I leaned back in my chair. For nearly 6 months, I had been coordinating a major property redevelopment deal on the edge of downtown. The area had been neglected for years, but recent zoning changes had turned it into one of the city's most promising investment opportunities. The numbers were clear. Anyone who invested early could see enormous returns once construction and property sales were completed. Originally, I had planned to bring my family into the project. The minimum entry investment was $150,000. It was a serious commitment, but the potential profits were incredible. Based on the projections, each early investor could earn close to $580,000 within a few years. I had even prepared a presentation for my parents and Daniel. Slides explaining the market trends, charts showing the expected property value increase, a detailed breakdown of how the investment would work. I had imagined sitting at the kitchen table, explaining everything to them while they listened with pride. But after the anniversary party, I had opened that presentation file and quietly deleted it. Actually, I said calmly into the phone, "My original partners won't be joining." Michael paused. "Oh, that's surprising. You seemed confident they would." "I was," I replied softly. "But I've decided to offer the opportunity to someone else." "Do you have replacements in mind?" "Yes," I said. Later that afternoon, I called 2 people who had always supported me: an old mentor from my first investment job and a longtime client who trusted my judgment completely. I explained the project to them. Neither of them laughed. Neither of them doubted me. They simply asked smart questions, reviewed the numbers, and agreed to join the deal. Within 3 weeks, the investor group was finalized. The contract was signed, construction plans were approved, and the project officially began. Meanwhile, life back home continued exactly as it always had. Through relatives, I heard that Daniel's newest startup idea had collapsed. Something about a cryptocurrency platform that had failed before it even launched. Apparently, he had lost most of his savings trying to build it. A few weeks later, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was my mother. Her voice sounded unusually gentle. "Sweetheart," she said, "your brother is going through a difficult time right now. We were wondering if you might be able to help him financially." For a moment, I closed my eyes. I thought about the investment deal, the opportunity I had once planned to share with them, the $580,000 they could have earned, but instead of explaining any of that, I simply replied calmly, "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't have money to spare." There was a short silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother sighed. "Well," she said quietly, "we figured as much." 6 months passed faster than I expected. The redevelopment project moved ahead smoothly. What had once been an abandoned block of empty buildings was now a busy construction site, filled with cranes, workers, and new foundations rising from the ground. Every few weeks, new investors began showing interest in the area as property values steadily climbed. The numbers were even better than we had predicted. Early investors were already seeing massive gains on paper. For me, it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was proof that all those years of quiet work, late nights, and sacrifices had meant something. I had built something real, something valuable. One morning, while drinking coffee at my desk, I received a message from Michael with a link attached. "Thought you'd want to see this," he wrote. I opened the article. It was from a regional business magazine highlighting the redevelopment project and the group of investors behind it. The article described the project's expected impact on the city's economy and listed several key contributors who had helped bring the deal together. Halfway down the page, I saw my name. It mentioned my consulting firm and credited me for coordinating the early investor partnerships that helped launch the project. At the end of the article, one line stood out clearly. Early investors are expected to see returns approaching $580,000 as property values continue to rise. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen for a moment. That evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's name. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." His voice sounded different than usual, quieter, less confident. "Is this article about you?" he asked. I already knew which article he meant. "Yes," I replied calmly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You're involved in that project?" He asked again. "Yes." Another pause followed, even longer this time. Finally, he asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "You made that kind of money?" "Yes," I said again. Silence filled the call. I could almost imagine him sitting there, trying to process what he had just learned. Then he spoke again, his voice softer now. "Why didn't you tell us about this?" I looked out the window at the city lights before answering. "I was going to." I said, the words hung in the air. "You were?" He asked quietly. "Yes." I replied. "I was actually planning to invite you and Daniel to invest with us." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything he had said before. How much would we have needed to invest? He finally asked. "About $150,000. And what would we have made, based on the current projections?" I said slowly, "Around $580,000. This time the silence stretched for nearly a full minute. When my father finally spoke again, his voice carried something I had never heard from him before. Regret. "Oh," he whispered. I didn't say anything, because there was nothing left to say. For years, I had tried to earn their respect. I had hoped that one day they would see me for who I truly was. But respect can't grow in a place where someone has already decided your worth. Opportunities, like trust, don't wait forever, and sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger or confrontation. Sometimes it's simply walking away and succeeding without them.